Almost a whole year had went by since the new survivors came to house. Clementine had many hit growth spurts since then. She wore a purple dress, black tights, and black flats. Her hair has grown out a bit and reached past her shoulders. It was still curly mop of hair. Plus, she still wore that blue and white hat with the blood stain on it. She would always wear it to remember her mom, dad, previous life, and the group members. She was still waiting for Luke to show up so he could take her outside and go through her drills. She was already got the consent from her adoptive parents. "Ah, there you are," Clementine heard Bill's voice say. She jumped upon hearing him. He seemed like a different person now than how she first met him. He was more destructive and sinister now. Clementine tried to look over and tried to plaster a brave face. "Where's Luke?" Clementine asked. "Busy. I'll be going out there with you today. Besides, the way I see it, you don't need him. Enough on the training wheels. It's time that you show how strong you really are," Bill said. "But what if I get overwhelmed?" Clementine asked. "Well, you better hope that doesn't happen," Bill said, "because today's test day. I can't help you cheat." Clementine nodded with a nervous look on her face as she was starting to regret doing these drills. "Hey, Bill, I didn't know you were going to go out there with the kid. You still want me to come along?" Johnny asked. Bill shook his head and he said, "No, I got this." He went to the door and opened it. "Come on now," the leader said to the child. Clementine approached the door. She felt like something very bad was about to happen. She walked outside with Bill following her. They walked to a nearby forest and went deeper into Parker's Run. Bill was by her side. There was silence at first until Bill finally said, "You're really one of a kind. At first I saw you as nothing but a pathetic kid. You were so inexperienced and weak, but I didn't notice a small fire in you. Persistence. You wanted to avoid death by any and all costs. So it is what you took it upon yourself, and when you get stronger, to be more experienced and even get smarter. You astound me. I always wondered what would happen to House when I die. But now, looking at you, I can see the hope. You need to just better yourself. Today is more than just a test of hand-to-hand combat with lurkers. Today is the start of you becoming the future leader of House." Thank you, Bill, but I don't want to be a leader. I just want to get strong enough so I don't die immediately if I end up being on my own. That's all," Clementine said. Bill shook his head and he said, "Typical, but he will at least speak of a weak person, Clementine. Whatever you choose to accept it or not, you and I are the same. We're both strong in body and mind. Now I need to do is fix this and your will and desire." "No, I'll help you guys if I have to, but I'm not going to lead," Clementine said. "And what about Alvin and Rebecca? If you lead, you can guarantee their safety," Bill said. No, I can't. I messed up once. I'm not messing up again," Clementine said. They were getting closer and closer to Parker's Run. Clementine had to fight every intention to turn and run. "You will mess up if you don't accept what you are. In fact, it'll be the biggest mistake of your life," Bill said as they walked into the clearing of Parker's Run. Clementine contemplated on what Bill had told her to do before the leader spoke up. Well, let's see how good you are." Clementine looked up to see a couple of several walkers approaching her and Bill. She pulled out her knife and attacked the closest walker. She kicked in its leg before stabbing it in the head. Continuing to do it several more times, more and more walkers approached her. After several minutes of doing this, Clementine backed away and huffed. She was tired and she wanted to end. "Keep going," Bill ordered, in an uncaring tone. Clementine fought through exhaustion and continued to kill more walkers. However, she was getting more careless and tired. There were 2 more walkers left, but the first one knocked her down. She gasped as she tried to push the walker off. Its gnashing teeth got closer and closer until she finally accepted defeat. She waited for the gnashing teeth to sink into her neck. But it never happened. The walker felt more like dead weight than growling stopped. She opened her eyes and saw the walker was taken off of her. It was Luke. He had saved her. "You had no right to interfering." Bill's voice was heard. He sounded angry. "She was about to get her neck chewed out," Luke exclaimed. "She would have handled it," Bill said. "Now leave us. We have more practice today." "No, I ain't doing that," Luke said. "She's done for the day." He looked down at Clementine and picked her up. She tensed up when he picked her up. "It's all right, Clem. I'm going to get you back to your mom and dad." Clementine nodded as she was holding on to her and Luke. She was scared. She was close to death today. Now all she wanted was for someone to comfort her and tell her everything was going to be all right. "Coddling her will only get her killed," Bill said. "Not caring for her will also get her killed," Luke argued. He walked away with Clementine in his arms. The girl couldn't help but whimper. The whole situation with Bill and the walkers had scared her. "It's all right, Clem. We're almost back," Luke said. She was still in Luke's arms as they entered Howe's, and they went looking for Alvin and Rebecca. Clementine had calmed down, but she was still very shaken up. Thankfully, it didn't take too long for them to find the child's parents. They rushed over to her and Luke and Clementine. "What happened? Is she all right?" Rebecca asked in a frantic tone of voice. "Yeah, she's just scared out of her mind," Luke said. "Here, I got her," Alvin said, as he took the girl out of Luke's arms. Clementine cuddled him because he held her. "It's okay, baby. You're safe now," Alvin said to comfort the girl. "What happened?" Rebecca asked in a calmer tone. "Bill happened," Luke said. "Snuck her out into Parker's Run for training, but pushed her too far. If I hadn't shown up when I did, she would have died." Rebecca gasped and said, "Oh my gosh." Alvin shook his head and he said, "That's it. We're leaving." "Look, I know we've talked about it for a long time, but are you sure?" Luke said. "Absolutely," Alvin said. "Let's get Carlos and Pete and execute the escape plan." Luke sighed, but he said, "All right, but it's not safe out there," Clementine said. "Yeah, but it's safer than in here," Alvin said, as he looked to Luke and said, "I'll be with you in a bit." "Okay," Luke said. "I'll have to go get Carlos and Pete." He turned and walked away from the family free to find the other two older men. Without a word, Alvin turned and walked with Rebecca. Clementine could tell that they were going to the bedroom portion of Howe's. Once inside the bedroom, Rebecca sat down on one of the beds, and the recent 11-year-old was placed on her lap. Rebecca hugged her as Clementine cuddled into her adoptive mother. "Will you be all right?" Alvin asked. "Yeah, I'll be fine," Rebecca said. "She just needs a few minutes with me." Clementine could feel Rebecca scratching her back. It felt soothing and relaxing. However, it did make her sheepishly, especially after she overexerted herself when it came to training. "All right, I'll be back," Alvin said, as he walked out of the room to find Luke and the others. "How are you feeling, baby?" Rebecca asked her adopted daughter. "Okay," Clementine said. Her voice was a bit shaky, but it sounded more tired than anything else. "You sound sleepy?" Rebecca asked. "A little," Clementine said, as she rested her head on Rebecca's shoulder. "Yeah, try a lot," Rebecca said. It wasn't long until Clementine's eyes closed shut. She was very tired after today's events. 1 hour later. "Clem, honey, wake up." Rebecca's voice was heard. Clementine's eyes slowly opened as she looked over at Rebecca. "Mommy?" Clementine said. She sat upright on the bed. "Hey, baby, it's time to eat," Rebecca said. Clementine nodded and got out of bed. "How long was I out?" Clementine asked as she rubbed her eyes. "About an hour," Rebecca said. "Do you feel better?" "Yeah," Clementine said. She stopped rubbing her eyes and got up from the bed. "Thanks for comforting me, Mommy." "Of course, baby. You don't have to thank me. Your daddy and I are here for you," Rebecca said, as she placed a hand behind her back and walked with her. They walked down halfway through relative silence. The silence was comfortable at first, but she didn't notice her adoptive mother seemed very intense. "What's wrong?" Clementine asked. "It's nothing," Rebecca said. "I'll explain later." Okay, Clementine said. They walked into the makeshift cafeteria and went over to the table to join Alvin. They sat down next to him, and Clementine being in the middle. "Hey, baby, you feeling okay?" Alvin asked as he kissed the girl on top of the head. Clementine giggled a bit and she said, "Yeah, I'm better, thanks." "So, what did Bonnie say to you about our plan? Carlos whispered. "Is she in?" "No. She said that it was better to fix something broken rather than start over again," Luke whispered. "Well, that's her choice," Pete whispered. "And as for the rest of us, We need to leave tonight." Clementine ate the food in front of her as she listened to the group at the table talk. As much as she hated to admit it, she knew that Howes wasn't very safe anymore. Carver was a threat, not just like a random stranger. He was trying to take her away from the people she loved and used her in the same way. But while the stranger's intentions were somewhat unknown to her, she knew that Carver wanted. He wanted her to toughen up and become leader, which was something that she didn't want to do. The rest of the meal she finished with more tension than usual. The adults barely talked at all. The mood was drastically different. Once they finished, they got up from the table, within a few of them separating. Clementine went back to playing with Sarah. They played a game of Monopoly while talking to each other. As always, Becca stayed away from them. Evening turned into night and the girls went to sleep. However, it wasn't long until they were waking up. "Clementine, come on baby, we're leaving," Rebecca said as she got the girl to sit upright. Clementine yawned as Rebecca got to her feet. Clementine knew that Rebecca what she was doing. She knew that her group was leaving the community. She followed Rebecca as they made their way down the hallway. Carlos walked next to them with Sarah. They all watched the rest of the group leave. They all squatted down to avoid being seen. Once Clementine, Rebecca, Carlos, and Sarah arrived, they stood up, and Luke led the way to the exit. They were as quiet as possible as they went through the door. However, a loud voice stopped in their tracks. "Hey, where do you think you're going?" a man inquired. It was George. In a flash, Alvin pulled out his handgun and shot George. All Clementine could hear was a loud scream before a group scrambled for the door. She was dragged along with her adoptive mother, as the sounds from earlier turned into panic and thuds. Howes was now active. The group ran outside and dispersed with Rebecca still dragging her along. It was her and her adopted family. Everyone else had dispersed and entered the forest surrounding Howes. A few gunshots flew past the few group members as they went into the forest. However, though, a scream followed behind them. Clementine stopped in her tracks. She looked to see Reggie groaning in pain. He was on the ground. "Reggie!" Clementine said, as she tugged at her adoptive mother's grip. "Keep going, I'll help him," Luke exclaimed. "Come on, baby, it's too dangerous," Rebecca said as she continued to drag Clementine along. The young girl showed more resistance before, but all she could do was look back to Reggie as Luke got closer. Eventually they disappeared from the line of sight, and Clementine looked forward. She and her family were now in the forest, and she felt awful for not being able to help with something. She wished that she could have helped back there. "Hey, Clem," Alvin said. "Yes, Daddy," Luke said. Clementine said as she looked up to her adoptive father. Can you take the lead and show us where Parker's Run is?" Alvin asked. "I've only been there a few times." "Sure," Clementine said. She quickened her pace and walked in front of her adoptive father. "You alright, baby?" Alvin asked. Clementine nodded and she said, "I wish I could have helped in some way." "You're just a child, Clem," Rebecca said. "Don't be so hard on yourself. You did a very good job. You were quiet and fast. We're proud of you." A small smile appeared on her face, and Clementine said, "Thanks, Mommy." She led them to the forest, and all they could hear was distant gunshots cease. It wasn't long until Clementine found a familiar path, and it followed back to Parker's Run. The family of three got out of the forest and walked up to the group that gathered around the Civil War monument. They were surprised by a couple of flash beams that hit them. "Easy," Alvin said. "It's just us." "Good," Pete said. "Fuck, what happened back there?" Nick asked. "Nick, language," Connie said in a scolding tone of voice. "Reggie got shot. Luke went back to help him. I couldn't do anything, and I had to get my family out of there," Alvin said. "It's all right. You did the right thing," Pete said. "Everyone else made it?" Rebecca asked. "Still waiting for Luke, Carlos, and Sarah," Connie said. "I'm not sure what happened to them after we dispersed." "They should be okay," Pete said. "Carlos and Luke were now at this places, and once they find it, they'll head out and find a new place to live, somewhere remote." "It won't be easy," Clementine said. The adults looked at her with confused stares. Clementine huffed and she said, "Now that we're out here, we'll have to worry about surviving. Finding a place to live is going to be really hard." "Don't worry, we will find a nice place to live, Clementine," Rebecca said to reassure Clementine. She shook her head. She hadn't been able to call a place a permanent home after the Walkers came. She stayed at house the longest, but she never felt like it was home to her. She still could feel her glances to her. Clementine felt a pair of hands on her shoulders, which was followed by her adoptive father's voice. "Come on, let's see if we can get some sleep," Alvin said. Clementine nodded in response. She wasn't sure if she could fall asleep after everything that happened, but she was more than willing to try.